"I can fix the airport runway in 4 hours," said the construction worker. The airport director laughed in disbelief. "A day laborer repairs critical aviation infrastructure?" When a construction worker faces the damaged airport runway and says he can fix it in 4 hours, the control tower's silence reveals that nobody imagines what comes next. Director Gerald Matthews, the man everyone called Steel Wing, stood in the Airport Emergency Operations Center, slamming his fist on the radar console so hard the screens flickered. "What do you mean the runway repair contractor won't arrive until Thursday? This is Monday morning. Runway 27 left has a structural failure in the landing zone. We've had to divert all international flights to airports 200 miles away. We're losing $3.7 million per day. The FAA is threatening to revoke our certification. Airlines are canceling routes permanently. My career is finished." The massive display screens showed the disaster, a section of the main runway with visible concrete deterioration and subsurface failure, discovered during routine inspection Sunday night, now forcing the closure of the airport's primary international runway. The specialized airport construction company said their crew was finishing a contract in another region and couldn't mobilize until Thursday at earliest. 4 days of diverted flights, cancelled operations, economic catastrophe for the entire region. In this chaos of airline complaints and emergency rerouting, Tony Silva pushed through the Operations Center security checkpoint, construction vest covered in concrete dust, tool belt hanging from his waist. Tony was 52, but looked 70 from decades pouring concrete in brutal heat, breathing cement dust and exhaust fumes, doing backbreaking labor for minimal pay. His vest was stained, his work boots were cracked and worn, and his hands showed the permanent scars of working with heavy equipment and rough materials. But his eyes had a different gleam when they landed on the runway damage photos displayed on the emergency screens, the gleam of someone recognizing a problem he'd solved countless times before. He approached the cluster of airport executives and FAA officials, arguing around the diversion protocols and financial projections. "Excuse me, Director Matthews," Tony said in heavily accented English, removing his hard hat respectfully. "I can fix that runway. 4 hours, maybe less. That's not complete structural failure. It's surface spalling from freeze-thaw cycles and subsurface moisture. I can remove the damaged concrete, apply rapid-set polymer concrete overlay, and restore full load capacity. Aircraft can land by this evening." The silence that followed lasted 12 seconds, but felt like eternity. Then Steel Wing turned, saw the construction day laborer in dusty clothes smelling of cement and sweat, and let out a laugh so cruel it made the FAA inspectors stop their regulatory discussions to watch the spectacle. "Get this illegal immigrant out of my operations center. This is FAA-certified airport infrastructure, requiring licensed contractors and engineering certification, not day labor patch jobs. Security, remove him immediately and check his immigration status before calling ICE." The airport police approached, hands moving toward Tony's arms, ready to escort him out. Operations staff gathering for the crisis briefing paused to watch, some filming on their phones, expecting entertainment. Tony didn't move, didn't lower his eyes, just held his hard hat with both calloused hands and kept looking at the runway damage photos as if they were speaking to him in a language only they understood. That's when the woman approached. She'd been sitting quietly in the back corner since the emergency meeting began, observing with a tablet and an inscrutable expression. She wore a simple navy pantsuit, practical flats, visitor credentials hanging from a lanyard around her neck. She looked like just another federal aviation inspector or insurance claims adjuster evaluating liability. But there was something about her presence, a quiet authority that required no credentials or introduction. "Let the man speak, Gerald," she said, with a calm but absolutely firm voice that cut through the dismissive laughter like a blade. Director Matthews turned, irritated by the interruption during his crisis. "And exactly who are you?" Janet Williams, FAA Runway Safety Compliance Auditor. I'm here documenting your emergency response protocols for Federal Safety Certification Renewal and Operational Competency Evaluation, she said evenly, displaying federal identification that looked entirely legitimate. I strongly recommend you hear what this individual is proposing before making decisions that could reflect poorly in my federal report. Tony turned to her, grateful for basic human respect and dignity. This runway doesn't need complete reconstruction, ma'am. It needs someone who understands concrete repair under aviation load requirements. I can see from these photos, the base and subgrade are still solid. The failure is in the top 3 inches of surface concrete that deteriorated from moisture infiltration and freeze-thaw damage over multiple winter cycles. I can remove the damaged surface layer, install proper moisture barrier, and overlay with rapid-set polymer concrete that cures to full strength in 4 hours. It will meet FAA load specifications and be ready for aircraft tonight. The silence returned, but transformed now into something different. It was the silence of institutional incredulity mixed with growing discomfort from the federal presence. Director Matthews took 5 steps forward, his face turning red with a mixture of condescension and defensive anger. 4 hours? You've been breathing too much concrete dust, Silva. Our certified airport construction contractor says this requires complete structural assessment, full-depth reconstruction, and FAA engineering approval. Minimum 1 week of work. You're a day laborer who probably doesn't even have legal work authorization or proper insurance. Get out of this facility immediately before I have you arrested for trespassing on federal property and interfering with aviation safety operations. But Tony didn't look at Director Matthews. He looked only at Janet, straight in her eyes, with a serenity and confidence that disarmed professional skepticism. I only need runway access, my concrete tools, rapid-set materials I can purchase from the supplier 15 minutes from here with my own money if needed, and safety clearance during the work. I owe this airport nothing. I just want to help. This community deserves its airport operating. These workers deserve their jobs, and travelers deserve to get home. Those last words hung in the tense operations center air like a challenge to everything the executives represented. Janet Williams, who wasn't actually FAA but Maria Silva, the newly appointed State Aviation Authority Director conducting anonymous airport management competency evaluations before her official announcement, felt something powerful catch in her chest. Not pity, recognition. She saw in that construction day laborer something utterly and completely absent in all the credentialed executives, all the expensive contractors, all the emergency protocols being discussed on screens. Pure expertise born from decades of hands-on work combined with genuine dedication to community service. Give him runway access, materials budget authorization, and full safety clearance, Janet said, and her voice permitted absolutely no argument or discussion. Director Matthews opened his mouth to protest, his face showing panic at losing control, but the look he received from this supposed federal auditor made him reconsider the career-ending implications of refusing a direct recommendation from FAA oversight during a federal compliance review. But if he causes any additional runway damage, creates any safety violations, or fails to meet FAA structural specifications, you're both personally and criminally liable for millions in damages and potential aviation disasters. Matthews snarled, immediately turning to call the airport authority's legal department and insurance carrier. Tony grabbed his tool belt and headed for the airside access gate that would take him to the damaged runway. Janet followed closely, carrying a safety vest and official observation clipboard. They walked across the vast empty tarmac in silence, past parked aircraft, past frustrated ground crews with nothing to do, past the visible economic impact of infrastructure failure. When they reached the damaged section of runway 27 left, The problem was exactly as Tony had described. The surface concrete showed spalling and deterioration, but probing with a screwdriver revealed the subsurface and base were solid and intact. Tony knelt on the concrete, running his scarred hands over the damage like reading Braille, his experienced eyes seeing what engineers with instruments would miss. Janet stayed at the runway edge, watching with growing respect. "How did you know this could be repaired so quickly, Tony?" Tony paused his examination, looking back at her in the bright morning sunlight reflecting off the white runway surface. "I've worked on airport runways for 28 years, ma'am. I was part of the crew that built this exact runway in 1996 when it was first constructed. I know every pore, every joint, every specification. I came from Brazil, where I was civil engineer, but my credentials aren't recognized here in America, so I work concrete. I use what I know however I can, and I take pride in quality work even if nobody knows my name." Janet felt her chest tighten with emotion. The story of so many talented immigrants, credentials dismissed, expertise wasted, reduced to manual labor while their knowledge could solve problems. And why are you offering to do this for free, buying materials with your own money? You could demand contractor rates, proper payment, recognition. Tony stopped his examination, stood up, and turned to face her fully, his weathered face completely serious in the harsh sunlight. "Ma'am, when you have the knowledge and ability to help, you help. My wife works in the terminal. She's a janitor cleaning the bathrooms. If this airport closes, she loses her job. We lose our home. My son wants to be a pilot, studies aviation at community college, dreams of working here someday. If I don't use what I know to protect this place, to protect these people and their dreams, what kind of father am I? What kind of man? Money doesn't matter when family and community are at stake." Janet felt unexpected tears threatening to fall. She stood before something increasingly rare in modern America: selfless expertise, driven purely by love of family and community rather than profit or personal recognition. In that precise instant, she made a decision that would fundamentally change 2 lives and potentially transform how the entire state valued practical expertise over credentials. The morning sun climbed higher, heating the runway surface. Tony was marking the repair area when the sound of expensive diesel trucks echoed across the airfield. 4 massive commercial construction vehicles pulled through the airside gate, company logos gleaming in the sun, followed by a luxury pickup truck. Out stepped a man in his 50s, wearing an immaculate hard hat with company logo, designer safety vest, carrying an iPad, and surrounded by a crew of technicians in matching uniforms with the company name embroidered on their backs. "Director Matthews," he shouted across the tarmac via radio. "It's me, Robert Blackwell, from Premier Aviation Construction. Heard about your runway emergency and rescheduled our other projects to help you out." Director Matthews practically sprinted from the operations center like salvation had finally arrived in expensive vehicles. Robert adjusted his gold-framed safety glasses and smiled with the absolute confidence of someone who'd never failed because they only accepted guaranteed high-profit government contracts. "We're the leading airport construction contractor in the region. Brought our complete runway reconstruction equipment and can have structural assessment completed by Wednesday with full reconstruction finished next Monday. Our emergency mobilization and assessment fee is $450,000, with full reconstruction quoted separately based on our engineering analysis." He noticed Tony on the runway, already marking the damaged area with chalk lines and measuring for his repair. "Wait a minute. Who authorized someone to be working on this runway? Federal Aviation Administration regulations require certified contractors and proper safety protocols for any runway work." Director Matthews let out a nervous, almost apologetic laugh. "Oh, that's just a day laborer claiming he can fix it in 4 hours with some concrete patch. Complete fantasy, obviously. But this FAA auditor insisted we let him try his approach." Robert looked genuinely alarmed, professionally horrified. Sir, runway construction work requires FAA-certified contractors, professional engineers, and complete quality assurance documentation. An unqualified person could create a catastrophic safety hazard affecting hundreds of aircraft and thousands of lives. This is potentially criminal negligence. He started walking purposefully toward Tony to stop the work, when Janet stepped forward decisively and blocked his path with quiet authority. "Robert Blackwell, is it?" Janet asked, her voice remaining calm, but carrying unmistakable steel underneath. "Yes, ma'am. Owner and president of Premier Aviation Construction, FAA-certified contractor, licensed professional engineer in 12 states, exclusive contractor for 9 major airports." "I'm the FAA Runway Safety Compliance Auditor," Janet replied smoothly. "And federal protocol absolutely requires observing all proposed solutions and methodologies before authorizing $450,000 in emergency expenditures from airport operating budgets during a federal compliance review period." Robert blinked, surprised but also professionally intrigued. "With all due respect, ma'am, that individual on the runway doesn't have proper contractor certification, professional engineering license, or FAA approval. Look at him, using basic hand tools on critical aviation infrastructure. He could compromise runway structural integrity or create FOD hazards affecting aircraft safety." Before anyone could respond further, Robert was already deploying his impressive array of sophisticated testing equipment, positioning ground-penetrating radar units, running computerized structural analysis, taking core samples for laboratory testing. His crew worked with impressive corporate efficiency, and news helicopters that had arrived to film the airport crisis captured every high-tech operation for the evening broadcasts. Tony just took a deep breath, began carefully removing the damaged surface concrete with a jackhammer, exposing the solid base beneath, and prepared his rapid-set polymer concrete mixture according to the manufacturer's specifications he'd memorized years ago. No anger showed on his weathered, sun-damaged face, just the ancient sadness that comes from seeing the same pattern repeat endlessly for nearly 3 decades in America. Money and credentials confusing expensive with effective, certifications systematically dismissing actual hard-won expertise and knowledge. Janet stayed at the runway edge, holding Tony's backup tools, water bottles, and safety equipment, documenting his methodology with photos. "Aren't you going to defend your approach to them?" Tony shook his head while working, his movements efficient and practiced. "Don't need to, ma'am. The concrete will speak for me when it's done. Good work speaks truth louder than any words or credentials." For 3 hours, Robert worked with maximum technological visibility and corporate professionalism. His team ran comprehensive structural analyses, generated detailed engineering reports, took dozens of material samples for off-site laboratory testing. News cameras captured every impressive piece of equipment and every confident statement. Director Matthews stood beside Robert like a grateful, vindicated authority figure, nodding enthusiastically whenever Robert said something that sounded highly technical and appropriately expensive for the crisis. "See here, Director. Our ground-penetrating radar and core sample analysis show subsurface deterioration patterns consistent with progressive structural failure. This requires complete full-depth reconstruction, removal of all damaged concrete, subgrade stabilization, new concrete pours with proper curing time. Our complete reconstruction protocol, $450,000 for assessment and mobilization, estimated $1.8 million for full reconstruction over 7 to 10 days of work." He generated more comprehensive reports, created detailed timelines and specifications, engineering data and projections scrolled impressively across multiple tablet screens. "Assessment complete and professionally certified," Robert announced loudly to the gathered airport officials, news cameras, and airline representatives. "Full runway reconstruction required for safety compliance. Timeline, 7 to 10 working days. Assessment cost, $450,000. Full project cost, estimated $1.8 million. We can begin immediately upon contract execution and deposit. Janet said nothing at all, just continued quietly watching Tony, applying his rapid-set polymer concrete overlay with practiced precision, his scarred hands working with the muscle memory that comes only from decades of daily experience, smoothing and finishing the surface to exact specifications. Over Tony's radio, his calm, accented voice, "Ma'am, concrete application complete. Surface finishing done. Now it needs 4 hours curing time before FAA load testing." 4 hours, Janet repeated quietly, checking her watch and making a note. Director Matthews overheard and laughed dismissively, shaking his head. 4 hours? Absolutely impossible. Concrete takes days to cure properly. That's when it happened. Robert, wanting to demonstrate his equipment's superior capabilities one final time, decided to run an immediate load-bearing test on the undamaged runway section adjacent to Tony's work area to establish baseline specifications for his reconstruction proposal. He positioned his sophisticated testing equipment and applied measured pressure loads. But what the sensitive instruments revealed shocked everyone watching. The undamaged original runway concrete from 1996 showed lower load-bearing capacity than Robert's equipment specifications predicted. It had degraded over 28 years, more than anyone realized. Robert frowned deeply, recalibrated his expensive equipment carefully, and tested multiple sections. Same concerning results everywhere. His confident expression began visibly cracking. "This is showing something unexpected," Robert said, loud enough for the news cameras and gathered officials to hear clearly. "The entire runway has degraded beyond original specifications. If we reconstruct only the damaged section to modern standards, we'll create a structural mismatch that could cause differential settlement and new failures within months. We'd need to reconstruct the entire runway, both the damaged section and all adjacent areas, to prevent future problems. We're talking about 3 months of work and $7 million minimum." Director Matthews's face went completely white, bloodless. $7 million? 3 months? That would bankrupt the airport permanently. Robert shook his head, looking genuinely troubled by the professional and ethical implications he'd uncovered. "I'm sorry, but Premier Aviation Construction cannot in good conscience do a partial repair that we know will fail. Our reputation and liability exposure are too high. This is outside our acceptable project scope." He began packing his expensive equipment rapidly, his crew following suit in organized retreat. Within 45 minutes, the impressive trucks were pulling away from the airfield, leaving Director Matthews standing on the tarmac, looking like a man watching his entire world collapse around him in real time. Tony continued working calmly and unhurried, conducting his final surface finishing, applying curing compound, setting up proper barriers and signage. After exactly 4 hours from concrete placement, he radioed Janet. "Ma'am, the rapid set overlay has cured to full strength, according to manufacturer specifications, ready for FAA load testing and certification if inspectors are available." The silence was absolutely total and profound. Director Matthews stared at Tony like seeing him for the very first time as an actual human being rather than invisible, dismissible labor. Janet felt her heart pounding with anticipation, and that's when she spoke, her voice carrying across the runway with undeniable authority that made even the hovering news helicopters seem to pause. "Antonio Silva, you have full authorization. FAA inspectors, conduct immediate load-bearing certification testing on this runway repair using standard protocols." The airport's FAA-certified inspectors, who'd been watching skeptically from their vehicle, drove onto the runway with their official testing equipment. They conducted comprehensive load-bearing tests, measured surface characteristics, verified specifications against FAA requirements, checked adhesion and structural integrity. Every single test result came back perfect. The repair met or exceeded all FAA structural requirements for commercial aircraft operations. The inspectors looked genuinely amazed, conferring with each other and rechecking their instruments in disbelief. "This is exceptional work," the lead FAA inspector announced officially. "The repair meets all federal safety standards for immediate return to service. Runway 27 left is certified for full commercial operations, effective immediately." The gathered crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Airline representatives made immediate calls to resume flight operations. Ground crews sprang into action, preparing for arrivals. The airport was saved. Tony packed his simple, worn tools into his belt, exhausted, covered in concrete dust and sweat, but smiling quietly to himself. Director Matthews stood completely frozen and speechless, and Janet, Maria, finally revealed herself completely and decisively. She removed her fake FAA credentials deliberately and pulled out her real identification as State Aviation Authority Director, holding it up for everyone, including the news cameras, to see clearly. "Gerald Matthews, you are suspended effective immediately pending investigation for gross incompetence, systematic discrimination, and creating an institutional environment that devalues expertise based on immigration status and credentials rather than actual knowledge and ability." She turned to Tony with profound respect. "Antonio Silva, the state is creating a new airport infrastructure knowledge program. You will be master instructor and technical director, teaching airport workers and engineers statewide the practical expertise that university degrees and contractor certifications don't cover. We will also fast-track recognition of your Brazilian engineering credentials. Salary, $98,000 annually plus full benefits, respect, and recognition. Will you accept?" Tony looked at the official appointment letter she extended with trembling hands, at the repaired runway behind him, already receiving its first landing aircraft, at his wife running from the terminal crying with joy, at his son standing beside her with tears streaming down his face. He fell to his knees on the concrete he'd just repaired, crying with overwhelming emotion. 28 years of invisible labor and dismissed expertise, finally ending. 6 months later, Tony led the state's Airport Practical Knowledge Division, teaching workers across 15 airports the hands-on expertise that saved millions in unnecessary reconstruction costs and prevented failures before they became crises. And every single morning he would touch the runway concrete at the spot he'd repaired that day, feeling the solid surface beneath his weathered hands, and whisper in Portuguese, then English, "Thank you, God. Thank you for letting me prove that knowledge and dedication matter more than papers, that helping others is the highest calling, and that one person with expertise and courage can change everything."